Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight on this Wednesday morning. You know, when you talk about the American dream, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Purchasing a home for most people. That's right. That is the American dream, and it's one of the most important things that people will do in a lifetime. And that's why we thought we would take this time on this Wednesday morning to chat with Dominic Fonte of Dominic Fonte and Associates, Cutler Realtor. Good morning, Dom. How are you?
Good, Pam Cook. How are you doing? And I hope your listeners are alert and ready to learn.
Ready to learn. Lots of good stuff out there, I'll tell you.
Absolutely.
You know, for people who maybe are tuning in right now, just fill them in a little bit, tell them a little bit about yourself so we can, let them know who you are and what you're all about.
Thanks, Pam. So my name's Dominic Fonte. I've been a full-time real estate agent in the local community for 35 years. And I've helped about 2,500 families go through the process. And it's not always pleasant because, a lot of times people have hardships and life-changing situations. So I want to be there, be empathetic, and be the heart of the teacher to make sure that they have a smooth transition, because a lot of times with real estate, it's very emotional and very expensive. So I've been doing it for a long time. And, I work with one customer at a time. And the comments I get a lot of times is, I don't know how you do this and make it feel like I'm your only customer. So I really take pride into making sure I give you the hand-holding experience that you need based on your experience.
Yeah. And you know what? I never really thought about it like that, but everybody's reason for buying a home or selling a home is different, honestly. It's not just the American dream. It's, like you say, it could be because of a death in the family or,
right.
Or maybe your family's growing or something like that. So let's take a little step back, and take a look over our shoulder at what it was like just not all that long ago. The housing market was very scary, right?
Yes, it was. And this is probably what I would say in a nutshell. What it was is when COVID came, March of 2020, March 15th, 2020, when everything got shut down. Normal real estate cycle in our area for sure would be April, May, and June is normally the busier cycle, right? So when COVID came out and it was such a shock to our society, no one really knew how serious it was going to be, and everybody hit the pause button. So it pretty much created an anxiety. And people realized that, since I'm stuck at home, the home's really important to me, and it started changing the workforce and everything. But I would say there was a big shortage of homes, and you have a huge pent-up demand. The rates were still around 3% at the time. And so a lot of people, when they decided to start getting back into the market, like in July, August, and September after COVID, normally it slows down around Christmas and Thanksgiving. It just shot like a rocket. And the houses went up to not 3 or 4% appreciation. They went up to 20%, which is not sustainable, Pam.
Right. Oh my
gosh. It was crazy.
Yeah. And I have family members who they had been searching for a home, finally found the one they loved. And then, my gosh, they had to pay so much more than the asking price just to beat out 5 other people,
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Usually you have like a little time to go back and forth. Well, here during that year and a half, there were like 7 buyers at least for every house on the market. And with the rates being as low as they were, I think people got very frustrated, and they were paying 10, 20, 30, 40,000 over asking, because at 3%, they were just looking at 150 a month or so. They didn't have to pull the 30, 40 or 50 out of their savings account if they had it. It was just more rolling it into their financing.
So what's that going to do in the future? So say somebody in that time, bought this house way above asking price, and there they sit. How does that affect them now?
I've been around long enough. This is my 7th adjustment. Like if you think about 08, a lot of people that are a little older would remember this, the 08, 9, 10, 11, and 12, when we really had a major crash in the real estate market and in the stock market. This is different this time. The reason why I think it's different is, number one, the lending practices aren't as liberal as they were back leading up to 08. Okay. So the lending practices, you still have to have skin in the game. You have to have decent credit and all that. So that's good. So that means it's not loosey-goosey lending practices. The second thing is supply and demand, right? And the third thing is interest rates. So when you think about like the demographics, this is what's different this time around. When you hear the headlines, and the headlines say, 6 months of decline, The rates have doubled, first time in history. And I think if you're sitting on the sidelines listening to this, remembering '08, it's pretty scary. And I think what happens is people tend to hit the pause button and they sit it out. But honestly, this is the reality of the thing that, yes, they were overinflated to 20%. Will they feel the pain? Probably not. And here's why. The supply and demand is always the big issue, right? So in Stark County, as an example, there's only 2.5 months of supply. That means it takes 2.5 months to burn off the inventory based on how many buyers, how many sellers, right? Well, in order for it to be a balanced market, like when you think of '08, we had 10 months of supply. So if we get over 7 months of supply, which we're at 2.5 months, even though the market is soft right now, in a way, think about this, 10 months of supply. And then, loosey-goosey terms. So yeah, things were crazy back then. And they had these zero down programs. Well, now it's nothing like that. The financing is firm. There's millennials, Gen Z, and Gen X that are coming into the marketplace. So there's going to be a pent-up demand for at least 10 years. And so the supply and demand is not in balance. It's still a seller's market, believe it or not, with all the things you're hearing.
And so for opportunities, it's different everywhere you go, right? Locally, we're different than maybe what's happening on a national basis, right?
That's right. So, I always say headlines terrify, they don't clarify. And so what you have to do, I think, as a consumer, and it's really hard to do these days with the way the news cycles and everything, they give you the headlines. But if you can't dig in and see what's happening in your backyard, because really it only matters in your backyard, right? But if I'm in California, Arizona, Nevada, or Florida, those were the areas that grew the quickest and they dropped the quickest as well. And those are the headlines. In the Midwest, things are usually, even in '08, it was bad, but not like it is in those 4 places I mentioned.
And, as we sit here, we can look to the future a little bit. I know you have to have some thoughts in your mind about what can be expected in 2023, right?
Yeah, it's hard to see without graphics. So of course your listeners, they're just listening and hopefully digesting. But I would say, Pam, if anybody out there, any of your listeners that are trying to figure this out, and based on personality type, sometimes people look 1 to 2 years out to try to understand what their game plan is for retirement, maybe moving out of state or whatever the case may be, or maybe helping mom out, when mom needs some assisted care. I would just say, you want to be an informed decision maker. And unfortunately, all people aren't created equal, agents and experience. I would just say you would want to have a meeting as soon as possible. Some people will say, well, Dom, I'm not doing anything for a year, so I don't really want to talk to you now. But talk to me now, because I can give you some guidance on how to prepare and what to prepare for so you don't do more than you need to, and to educate you throughout the process. But keep in mind, the market does shift. And about every 3 months, the market shifts. So what happens today could be different in 3 months. You know what I mean? So it's like education.
Yeah. That's probably the hard part, but like you say, preparing ahead, that's certainly important. I do want to remind folks who are there, who are listening right now, you can also watch us on our Facebook page. Just go to 1480 WHBC's Facebook page and like it, or you can check us out live on our YouTube channel at 1480 WHBC as well. So before we take our first break, fill folks in if they want to get in contact with you or they have questions and starting to, formulate those things in their mind right now. How do they get in touch with you?
Yes, there's several ways. You can call or text 330-418-1535. Of course, you can email me at my name, Dominic at DominicFonte.com. Or if you just want to go to my website and check things out, I have a lot of reviews. Go to DominicFonte.com.
All right, very simple. And if you're watching us, we've got the phone number and all the information up on the screen as well. So, all right, we will take our first break. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about questions, the most asked questions that people have when they approach you. And we'll continue with Dominic Fonte and Associates, Dominic Fonte, Color Realtor, right here on 1480 WHBC. And welcome back to Spotlight, everyone. I'm Pam Cook with you this morning. And again, I will remind you that You can go to our Facebook page and like our Facebook page at 1480 WHBC. Also, go to our YouTube channel and you can watch us live, or anytime you have a minute, you can go and check it out. And we would love for you to do that. We're talking housing, realty, all kinds of good stuff, because as I mentioned at the start of the show this morning, the American dream, but also just a really important part of your life when you make that decision to buy a home or sell yours for whatever reason it might be. And on this Spotlight Wednesday, with me this morning is Dominic Fonte, Cutler Realtor, and Dominic Fonte and Associates, I might add. I always remember my mom saying, everybody's selling their house in the springtime. That's when you do it. Got to sell your house in the springtime. Is that true, or do people sell their houses all year round?
They sell them all year round, but here's kind of the perception versus reality.
Okay.
So a lot of times, if you have kids and they're in school and you're thinking about logistics, vacations, and just ease of transaction, a lot of times you think of April, May, and June.
Okay.
That's when a lot of the times happen. But here's the question I would suggest. If you're buying or selling, think about this. If you're selling and you put it on the market April, May, or June, you have more competition. If you put it on the market on an off time where there's less competition, with the supply and demand in the current situation, you stand a better chance to stand out and to maximize your opportunity. Honestly, that's what I would say.
Yeah. And it's a scary thing too. When people are, maybe even first-time home buyers, they don't know what to expect. They have no idea what the process is or what it's like or what's required of them. I would imagine that's where you come in, right?
Yep, that's for real. So I have a very unique system. So if you think about real estate in general, a first-time buyer would know this, but with the heart of a teacher, we try to educate everybody. So between the age of 25 and 75, I would say the majority of the population bought maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 homes in their whole life, and that's all they really know. So if you're a first-time home buyer, there's a 15-step process, and 70% of the consumers today have to actually get financing, right? So
Right.
That's a whole experience in its own, trying to figure out where to go. And there's 6 professionals that they're going to interact with through the process: a listing agent, a selling agent, a mortgage company, appraisal, a home inspector, and escrow, which is title company. And so there's a lot of moving parts. So I think the goal, Pam, would be, it's like a GPS. I don't know where I'm going in the dark. The GPS guides me. I'm your GPS. You need a professional, right? You need someone that's seasoned, that can kind of relate to what you're going through. When I've done this many times, if it's your first time, I have to remember it's your first time and speak your language. Yeah. And so I think really the art of the real estate experience is connecting up with that person or professional that really gets it. And how I get it now is because I've done it enough times. I know where the pitfalls are, and I know what people typically go through. So yes, GPS. Think about it. GPS, the headlights in the dark.
I love that. I love it. So what's my first step? I mean, do I have to figure out what kind of house I want? I mean, what would be the first step, would you say?
Good question, obviously. You always want to put the horse in front of the cart, not the cart in front of the horse. So first step, this is how we do it. And, there's other styles, I imagine. First of all, it's just getting educated. So I call it a consultation. So normally what happens is someone would reach out to us. We would get them on a schedule for a 15, 20-minute meeting and just give them the bird's eye view of the 15 steps. And, sometimes, they're online and they say, oh, I'll get pre-approved. So they're kind of doing things backwards. So I always say, figure out like what your wishes, your wants and needs are. Like a lot of times, I want this, I want that, but I really don't even know if that's realistic. Is that, something I can afford? So have the consultation first. That's always step one. And even if you do nothing, it's just educating you, because like I always say, an informed decision maker is a happy decision maker. So I broke it into 15 steps. So step one is that, meet with the professional. Then once you decide that you're mentally, because real estate is very emotional. You don't fall in financial love, you fall in love, right? So you got the Valentine's special coming up, fall in love. So you fall in love with your home, and then what happens is you get emotional about it, and you're thinking, geez, as soon as you go to work and tell all your friends about the home purchase, they're all experts immediately, and they start telling you, you should have done this, you should have done that. And then you get scared and the emotions get the better part of you and you forget why you're buying. So there's a whole procedure on how I do it. And we find if you read our reviews at dominicfonte.com, you'll see I have over 400 5-star reviews. People kind of explain their experience in essence. And so I think really that's the first step I would do is the consultation. The way I do it is probably different than most. So you get the bird's eye view. I give you information to take away. We have so many good guides. As an example, I have this, how-to guide. And so when you're a first-time buyer, especially, now Pam, you and I are a little older, so we kind of get it. But let's say you're a first-time buyer, you grew up in a nice home and everything's great, and then you move into this grandma's house, and you're like all freaked out, like you got to gut everything. You don't know if you have the money, how to do it. So I have a how-to book on what colors and how to match up, how to paint wood, what to do to enhance your house very affordably with just some sweat equity. So these are like tools that are kind of added to the GPS or the headlights that I offer the clients that I work with.
Do you find that people, and maybe younger people who've not been through the process before, do you find they overestimate their wish list?
I would say in general, most people do, because keep in mind, you only do it 2 or 3 times in your life, maybe 4. And the market's always changing. So this is what's kind of weird. You might say, well, I had a professional come out and look at my house. And then 3 months later, the price could have went up a lot back during COVID when everything shot through the roof. Now it's still good and still high, but it's more stabilized. So you just need to understand if you're looking east for the sunrise or the sunset. It's kind of super important. And again, this is where I go back to, the GPS or the real estate professional. You're not really paying to have a conversation. I mean, it's just a conversation to kind of help understand what your needs are, kind of wants and needs analysis. And then I can give you some information. And then at that point, you process that information, and then you can decide if this is right for you, because maybe it isn't right for you. Maybe you should just rent or stay home and chill for a while. But there's a lot of this that I see right now, a lot of uncertainty. And I imagine it's inflation. It's, the interest rates went up. And what does that mean? Like, for example, what's the interest rates right now? Well, 6.5, 5.875. So if you only know 3%, that's scary. But I remember for years, we would have refinanced over and over again for 8%. So it's kind of all relative in a way, isn't it? So education is the key. Work with the professional.
Absolutely. And speaking of professionals, when we come back, we'll take our break for the news. When we come back, we're going to talk about the other professionals you'll deal with when you're buying or selling a home. And we'll continue our discussion on Spotlight this morning with Dominic Fonte. And again, you can join us on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. We'd appreciate that, certainly. And Dominic at dominicfonte.com is his email address if you want to get in touch with him. We'll be back. We have a Spotlight right here on 1480 WHBC. And welcome back to Spotlight on this Wednesday morning. Pam Cook with you this morning, and we're talking homes, real estate, the steps to getting your dream home, all of those things with Dominic Fonte. DominicFonte.com. That's how you can get more information. But also with Dominic right now this morning, we're talking about, well, the steps that it takes to get to purchasing a new home and the things that you need to do to have a new home. Things like, deciding exactly what it's going to be like when you get into that process, because so many things can change and so many things can be different. And Dominic is a person who certainly can give us a lot of advice. That's why we have him on our Spotlight this morning, although we may have a little bit of an issue with his connection right now. I'm not sure because I'm not seeing him, but he's been talking a lot about the plans, and there he is.
Never mind.
We were talking, we've been talking about the steps and all those kinds of things, and you were mentioning different names of other people besides the real estate agent or the realtor that will be helping you. So there are others involved. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so as a buyer or a seller, there's going to be professionals involved in the real estate transaction. So we'll say, let's start with the real estate agent. So you have a real estate agent. There's many of us out there. Keep in mind that the different levels of expertise are not the same. So you want to be careful to make sure you're checking reviews and you get the right professional. So that's step one. So like how I do it personally is, we feel that 70% of the time in Stark County, you have to get financing. So that means you have to deal with some kind of a loan, a bank or a mortgage company or credit union. There's different ways to do it. And if you're lucky enough to get cash, great. That eliminates a couple steps. But generally speaking, there's 6 professionals involved in a real estate transaction. So step 1 would be the real estate professional. So then the second thing is a mortgage company. We want to get you pre-approved. And so, you might have a local bank you go to. And here's the key to the bank. There's a lot of guidelines and a lot of rules. And a lot of people don't realize this, but most of the time, when you get a loan at the local bank or the mortgage company, it's sold to the secondary market, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, or Ginnie Mae, which is kind of complicated, but here's the essence of it. The person that takes the information, we call them the originator, loan originator. If they're not savvy, like each professional in each category has to be very savvy, and your agent or me will give you some ideas on the experts. So once that happens is you do the pre-approval process, and then you find yourself a home. And once you negotiate a home, guess what? In the purchase agreement, are you doing what's called due diligence? That means like a home inspection, a pest inspection, radon inspection. So there's a lot of concerns that people would have. So you want to have a competent inspector. So the agent can give you some guidance there. Once you get through the inspection, is there some things to deal with, like a latent defect or possibly a safety issue? Now, whenever you buy a home, there's always what we call a honey-do list, right? There's just a huge honey-do list. And that's just welcome to real estate. But if there's a safety issue, which a lot of times we don't discover it until we have the professional inspector involved, then the agent that you have hired on your team has to help you figure out how to deal with what's real and what's fake that needs to be addressed, renegotiated, or if you're buying a lemon, you cut it free, right? Well, if you get to the point where the lender and the inspection and everything's going pretty good, the next thing is you agreed to buy it for a certain price. So fair market value is what a buyer's willing to pay, a seller's willing to accept. But here's the trick to it. With the market being kind of crazy like it was, the appraiser then has to come out and give them their fair market value. Now, keep in mind, you as a buyer and a seller already agreed, but the lender is not given the money unless the appraiser says, hey, this thing, I think we can justify the price, but sometimes not. Sometimes the appraisal comes back low. So then your real estate professional has to deal with renegotiating and trying to figure out how to save the transaction so that your heart's not broken once you fall in love with the house, right? And so that's a whole nother can of worms. So these are the things that create anxiety for the customer. And this is why it's so very, very important to work with a very savvy knowledge professional. Then after that, let's say you get through the lending, you get through the inspection, you get through the whole process, and about 30 days out, they say, hey, good news, we're going to close. And you're like, yeah, party time. And so you show up at the escrow, which is what they call it escrow, but it's a title company. So, you have to have homeowner's insurance, like if your house burns down, protection. But also you need to have what's called title insurance. You've heard them say title fraud, someone stole my equity out of my home. So when you get title insurance, it's split usually between the buyer and the seller, super duper important. You want the Eagle policy, which gives you the maximum protection. You buy it one time and it protects you through the whole life of the home. And so why do I even need to have that, you say? Well, you need to have it because let's say you buy your home a year into the home, you're living there, raising your family, having a happy life in the backyard, and all of a sudden you get a notice saying, hey, someone's claiming they own this property. Now you got a legal issue. So then the title insurance policy would kind of protect you for that. Or if someone says, hey, I never got paid for the roof. I put a roof on 5 years ago and never paid me. So these protections protect the buyer and the seller for the life of this property. So that's your protection. Very important.
Yeah.
And so not only do they do the title policy, they issue this policy usually 30 or 60 days after closing. And when you're happy in buying and you're all excited and you get the keys and you're moving in, 60 days later, this magical form comes in the mail and you misplace it. That's your protection to protect you. So you always got to be aware of that. And then the final thing is, if you're a seller, for example, and you have a mortgage or an equity line or taxes, they're responsible to make sure all those things get paid, because that's how they can issue a safe title policy. So in a bird's eye view, there's 6 professionals you typically deal with, and you want to make sure that the foundational person would be your real estate expert. Super duper important.
All right. So what about down payments? Because people don't know, what should I have? And it can be confusing and scary, but you've got to prepare for that.
Right. So, there's always perception and reality. I always talk about this all the time. Some people say, well, what about this PMI stuff? Like, what's PMI? I call it mafia money. So like, let's say if you're getting a conventional loan and you put down, I don't know, 5%, 10%, 15%. So then the bank requires you to have what's called PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. But the thing is like, that doesn't benefit you. That's just saying that if you default, the PMI company, private mortgage company, will step in and pay so many cents on the dollar. You still lose your home, but the bank's protected. So a lot of times, like our parents would say, oh, save your money, put 20% down, eliminate PMI. But what happens is there's a lot of factors that play into it, which would be what's your credit rating, what's your reserves, things like that. So you can technically, if you're a veteran with a DD-214 and eligibility, you could buy a home with 0 out of pocket, 0 down. Wow. And then FHA is another one you hear about. And a lot of people think, well, FHA is like for first-time buyers, or maybe if you have low income. That's not true. In Stark County, it's like, I think $472,000. You could technically buy a home in Stark County, anywhere in Stark County, for up to $472,000, let's say, with 3.5% down payment. So that's kind of a Ginnie Mae. It's sold to Ginnie Mae. Even if you go to a local lender or, a mortgage broker, and some people don't understand the difference. Some are mortgage brokers where they don't necessarily have a place where you can go in and make the payment. Like say, local banks, so some people feel, well, I'd rather go to a bank than a mortgage company. But here's what you got to remember. When you look at these options, you want a reputable company, right? And you get the best rate and the best closing costs, because they go hand in hand. So a lot of times, some people will say to me, Dom, their rate's like 1/8% higher, but then their closing costs are like $2,000 higher. Mm-hmm. So you really kind of need someone to help you understand that, because the surface isn't always what the reality is, I guess. So if you deal with a professional that's super good, super knowledgeable, super ethical, then overall you will have a stellar experience. And if you work with me, then the goal is that you refer all your friends, family, and you write me a 5-star review. That's what we strive for. And that's what you want to deal with. If you got a real estate professional, make sure that those are the standards. And if they're not, you better give me a call. That's
knowledge and trust are 2 of the most important things, which obviously somebody could forge with you very simply.
And experience. Think about it. 2,500 times. There's some stories there, some pitfalls and things that I learned over the years. Not saying that I'm still not learning things. I think we all continue to learn because the market evolves. And so I think it's important to be dialed into the changes as the markets evolve, so that you can help your consumers and customers be an informed decision maker with the heart of a teacher. That's the way we approach it here with my group that I work with.
And you always see people pull up their phones, get your mortgage approved right away in like 30 seconds.
I know, magic button. Hey, there's no magic button, trust me.
No magic button. I look at that and go, no.
Well, but if you think about it, the biggest segment of the buying market right now is the millennials. And so what happened was, since, they're getting married and starting their families and, getting out of school and all that kind of thing. So everybody wants the American dream, like you said, Pam. But the trick is this, you can get into a home with 3%, 5%, 10% down. There's tons of programs. Even you can do USDA with 0 down. But there's a lot of programs, so you got to be informed to see what fits your ticket. And then since there's no more inventory and they're not building enough, what they ended up doing is the Fed raised the rates from 3 to 6, actually 7.5, but it's back down some. So it basically took all those millennials, like not all of them, but a lot of them, and forced them into the renting market. So then it created a premium. They're just dying on paying for rent. and they're throwing their money away. I mean, there's a transition. I get that. But they want to own. They don't want to throw their money away for rent. So they forced them out of the market because the rates went up 3% minimum, which is the highest in time. And believe me, the minute those rates come down, they're piling back into the market, and then the rental market will shift again. So there's been a shortage of rentals, and they're at a premium right now because, unfortunately, a lot of people got forced out of the market. And that's the only way they calm the market down. So the market appreciated at 20%. Remember I mentioned that a while ago?
Right.
Well, now it's like, say, 11%. But what the norm would be is, let's say, 3.5 to 4% appreciation. So we're still high. It's just not as high as it was, you know?
Right.
So it still favors the seller. You just need a savvy agent to guide you through the process, how to make your offer look as good as possible so you win that bid. And in the long run, if you're staying in that house for a period of time, you will always benefit. Real estate is the most sound, steady. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. I mean, it's a slow, steady appreciation, an asset builder, a forced savings plan, and a
solid
place
investment
customized for your loved ones.
Right. All right, we're going to take our final break. This hour is going very quickly, as I knew it would, but we'll take our final break, and we'll finish up talking more with Dominic Fonte here on Spotlight on 1480 WHBC. All right, time now for our final segment on Spotlight on 1480 WHBC this morning. Pam Cook with you, and speaking with Dominic Fonte this morning. And I got to ask you, Dom, we were talking about renters. You were mentioning, people, the rental market and that kind of thing. So just what would you say to a person who says, yeah, but when I rent, I don't have to pay to fix anything. What do you say to them to make them understand where buying might be beneficial to them?
That's a excellent question, and I get it a lot. So thanks for asking. Yeah. So psychologically, you think of it like this. And this would be a perfect example to process it logically, not emotionally, because that's an emotional thing many times. It's what I'm worried about is going to happen. Even if it doesn't happen, I'm just anticipating it happening. So I would say when you're in a home or a rental, how many times has the water heater went out? How many times has the roof leaked? How many times has the furnace stopped working or the water stopped running? The things that you would worry about. Now, if you pour grease down the drain or you get hair stuck in the drain, of course, it's going to drain slow, but that would happen anywhere. But I would just say, generally speaking, the easy way to figure it is, let's say the average rent is $750 a month, which is pretty reasonable nowadays.
Yeah.
Do 750 times 12 times 3 years. See what that total is. So if any of your listeners are out there, do the quick math and look at that number, and that'll make you sick. And so the goal is that if you have real estate, and as a real estate agent, you're saying, well, of course you want to say that because you sell houses. But I'm just saying, to help you build wealth, it's not as bad as you think. If you deal with a professional, they can give you like a list. So I have a list of contractors that could help you on certain things that you're not aware of. Because, how many times do you as a consumer say, oh, I need this, it's going to be millions of dollars or thousands of dollars. And really, it's not that bad. It might just be a repair, $75 repair. And so I think it's just more like being an informed person. The biggest punch in the stomach as a renter is 5 years goes by like that. Yeah. And if it's 1,000 times 12 times 5, I mean, you could almost paid for something, and not to mention the down payment. So you can never get that money back. And I know, when we go through transition, maybe divorces, we're transitioning from one area to the other. Sometimes, you want to know the area. So you might live there for a year. That's okay. Or 2 years. But in the long view, your wealth will be built by owning real estate. It's just a statistic. I mean, even more than the stock market, it's bricks and mortar. It's like a place you can customize, a safe place you can control your environment somewhat, and have a yard and have a park and have walkability and all these things. With a tenant, you're frustrated because you don't want to do too much because it's for them and not you. Yeah. And so when it's your house, you have what's called pride of ownership, equity appreciation, and all the benefits. Not to mention there's a little tax shelter and stuff like that. But yeah, I would just say, do the math. How many times 12, the rent times 12 times how many years, and then look at that number and then never look at it again.
Yeah.
Call me. I'm just saying it sucks, but
I gotcha.
it is what it is.
Let's talk a little bit about the aesthetic side of it. Are people still looking for, great kitchens and open concepts and the best bathroom in the whole world?
Yep. It's funny, in the 90s, oak trim, oak everywhere was so awesome. Now everybody's painting it. Like if you watch HGTV, which obviously a lot of people do, you have like the light grays and the different taupes and the brushed nickel and the black stainless, and you have things like that. Now, brass was a big thing in the 90s. So there's a brass component coming back, which just kills me. And then all that wallpaper, remember all the wallpaper from the 80s and 90s? So there's some accent walls coming back with wallpaper, and it's kind of really cool vibe. But in general, I would say people still like the open concept, the master suites, the master baths. You're not necessarily getting the big jet tubs and the big soaky tubs. They're independent tubs and huge showers. And some of the showers have music and lights. It's like a car wash. You go into the car wash, 2 heads. It's just like, it's like a whole experience. And so it's just funny how things evolve. But I would say in general, light, open area, a lot of natural light, killer backyards with fire pits and entertainment. So ever since COVID, I think that's super important, is like when you cocoon in your environment, you want to enjoy life, man. And you want it to be somewhere where you can ride your bike, maybe walk on the paths, go get your circadian reset by looking at trees and nature, so I think it's super important. And now people don't need to be in their office. Like, look at us. Where's the studio? I'm not even there. I'm in my office.
That's right.
And so like we can still conduct business and communicate to the consumers. And hopefully your listeners are gaining something today, because you know what? This is my 4th quarter. I want to make sure we finish it up, first class.
Yes. So tell everyone, as we wrap this up, tell them how they can get in touch with you.
Yes. You can call or text 330-418-1535, 330-418-1535. You can always send me an email at Dominic@DominicFonte.com. That's my name, Dominic@DominicFonte.com. I have over 400 5-star reviews to see what you'll experience working with me and my team. We always put your needs first with the heart of a teacher. Go to DominicFonte.com. And I have this neat tool. It's a landing page. It's an algorithm, which means if you go here, it'll give you a quick overview, like a 25-page colored report within minutes, and go to Dom, D-O-M, that's my short name, Dom, what'smyhouseworth.com. Dom, what'smyhouseworth.com. And it'll just ask you a few questions, and it'll send you the properties around your house. It's very cool. But if you need more of an accurate evaluation, or just trying to figure out, how to do it, what to do next, no obligation. Just give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to chat with you. And Pam, thank you for taking the time today. I hope your listeners gained something.
I'm sure.
Have a nice Valentine's Day for all those little people out there trying to find love.
You too. Thank you so much.